Welcome everyone to the Michael Chekhov NMCA way, Michael Chekhov's fifth guiding principle. And I am Lisa Dalton, president of the National Michael Chekhov Association, and I am here with Wil
Kilroy, and I'm the vice president of the National Michael Chekhov Association.
And we have several guests with us now who are all NMCA-oriented people. Ophir, say hi for me, please.
Hello, everyone. Ophir from Israel.
And Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And Babs.
I'm Babs. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Sean, but I live in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
And we are here today, as I said, speaking about Michael Chekhov's fifth guiding principle. This is the fifth of the series that Wil and I have been offering, and if you have your Michael Chekhov playbook, you will find the 5 guiding principles on page 79. So our first guiding principle was the concept of practicing the psychophysical exercises to affect artistic states, and that process is what gives us the foundation for our psychophysical exercises as a launching point for the NMCA pedagogy. And then the second guiding principle is the use of intangible means to affect tangible artistic states. So those include things like the concept of atmospheres, the principles like the 4 brothers, psychological gesture, and anything that is actually not touchable, but creates a very experiential impact on you as the artist and on the audience. And then the third one is the means to employing the higher creative spirit and intellect to unify all the different various aspects of the performance and of the technique. And then the fourth one was how to use each and any given point on the chart as a launch point into triggering an inspired state that in fact includes everything that is here. And so with that, it brings us to our fifth guiding principle. That fifth guiding principle is that we want to ask each point in the method, in what way, how do you activate or inspire freedom in my technique? It is to what degree and by what means do you free my talent? So with that question that we're going to really look at today, what does this guiding principle mean? In order to really find that, I want to propose the question to Wil to launch into what freedom means to talent. What does freedom mean in this context? Why would we want freedom? Why does our talent want or need freedom? So Wil, would you take that up?
Sure. Well, I think this guiding principle is very practical because I think it applies to any sort of technique that you're going to work with, as far as trying something, investing fully into that technique, and then asking the question, even the most basic, does this do anything for me? And there are techniques, even within the Michael Chekhov work, that work better for one person, but don't really affect somebody else. So I think it's important that you really invest in every technique around that whole chart and totally immerse yourself in it to then be able to ask that question of how does this free my talent? And as far as freedom, to me, I think a lot of actors get stuck in their head. I'm sure, particularly those of us that are teachers, see our students do this all the time. They make a great plan about their scene, and they might have wonderful objectives and tactics that they're going to act out, and then it all just comes out sort of flat, and nothing's really changing. And that's where I think this work comes in a powerful way, because you are given physical connections that you can connect to your objective or your tactics that can free you to really pursue whatever you're pursuing as that character. And without that, probably a lot of us have seen cerebral acting where it's all coming from their head. They've intellectualized it, but they have not physicalized it. And that's what's exciting to watch from the audience, is how a character is completely embodied. So it's not just what they're pursuing in their head, it's what they're pursuing overall. And you do a great exercise typically of having images trapped and letting that image be free. And to me, it's that way with any of these techniques. How is it going to free me? Is it freeing up my voice all of a sudden because I'm thinking about flowing and now my voice is flowing and changing and it's freeing my voice? Or is it just freeing the body physically to pursue something? Is it allowing me to no longer focus on the thoughts, but I can really invest in whatever my objective is because I'm pursuing it now with full body, full mind, and full spirit going into whatever it is. So I think that's an important question to ask, and why Michael Chekhov has it as a guiding principle to really, ask the technique itself, how are you freeing my talent? And then you'll know too what to concentrate more on, what you might want to dive into further, and go from there.
Yeah. Is there anyone who wants to share what freedom as an artist would mean or does mean to you?
I'm thinking of being in the present moment as opposed to being elsewhere, as a way to get centered in the present moment.
Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Absolutely. When we are in that sense of the present moment, there is a freedom from all the attempts to control and manage what we're trying to, struggle with and control. And we're free from the past. We're free from worries of the future. And all of the tools are designed to allow us to get into that absolute present moment.
I think freedom really means to me as an actor is kind of to go beyond our limits or the limits we've set for ourselves. Sort of often for me, I have a set characters of which I play often, and I sort of can go to them. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it's limiting. And so I think this work really does open up some other channels to go beyond where you've been, because sometimes you don't have a director who takes you there. You're on your own a lot of the time. That's my experience.
I agree with you, Babs, especially if, as I know you are, if you're a skillful actor and one of the more skillful actors in a cast, you're not the squeaky wheel. And so you're not getting the attention. And so when a director is busy directing traffic and trying to bring the weaker elements of the cast up to a certain standard, if you're already at that standard, the director often just keeps leaving you to yourself. And while in some way it's kind of a compliment that you're doing fine, you don't need more attention, our inner artist always would like some reflection, some feedback, and some challenge, some sort of gauntlet thrown at the feet that says, can you bring it to this level? And so when we have Michael Chekhov's tools, we actually can ask ourselves where, and we can fly back over ourselves and give ourselves the gauntlet and, use those tools to free us from sort of the safety net of what we're in and bring us further out. Very good. Anyone else? So I would like to talk and ask you guys to think about for yourselves what some of your favorite tools are, and maybe just contemplate for a moment, what are some of my favorite tools and in what way do they free me? How do they work for you that gives you a sense of freedom that makes and is one of the reasons that you like them, because you feel they work to free you more so than some of the others.
I just want to jump in and quickly share something because it just happened today. My students are writing different reflections who are doing this work as part of the stage movement class. And one of the students wrote about how she was nervous to even focus on theater because she had a poor sense of body image and felt like she wasn't fitting the role model of a Hollywood, actress of what she envisioned. And she was speaking about doing this work because it was so physical and forced her to be in her body. So maybe to be in it and not look at it, from the outside, but instead to really be and activate, that it really helped her realize that she can do this work and she doesn't have to, fit into some kind of mold that she thought she should. And she wrote about how it has made her feel more dedicated to the art of theater, where she was really questioning it before. And so that's a real tribute to Michael Chekhov's work, that here's this person who felt very insecure physically, but then being forced, as far as a class, to do this work, was able to embody herself and feel a lot more confident and comfortable. So I can't say it was one particular technique. She didn't allude to that, but I think just in general, doing this work allowed her to free herself. So that was a real testimonial that I just got to read this morning as part of my class.
I have the most influential thing and freeing tools that I can pick. Maybe it will be the center in the chest, the ideal artistic center. Just because in my private life, not in my professional life, well, I'm in workshops and on the stage, I can really, be with presence, but in private life, I'm not, and I'm more of a shy and more of, you not see me going through the door. You didn't see me. You didn't realize that I'm there. So that's the most freeing things for me, and the feeling of ease that I try to embrace all the time. But it's hard. I have to say that it's hard, but it's that's my thing.
So Ophir, to follow up on that, when you're going into a personal situation where maybe you want to be seen, are you focusing on that IAC and just radiating out to share yourself as opposed to closing off?
Yeah, when I'm not involved in something very intellectual or very, I don't know, frightening or stressing, I can have this moment and just do this and be connected. And yeah, I'm doing it.
Hi, Virginia. Also welcome. Virginia and everyone, just to reiterate, we're talking about how the use of the tools, we can ask each tool, in what way do you free my talent? And we are looking now, asking a question about our favorite. What are our favorites, and in what way do they free my talent? And you can imagine, because of the law of polarity, what the next question might be. So does anyone want to go into their favorites and talk a little bit about some of their favorite tools and what way they've found them to be freeing?
I think one that I do use a lot for myself and also for teaching is psychological gesture, simply because it really helps the students jump into, especially when they're doing Shakespeare, like a monologue, even their scenes. But it's just, as the more I teach it, and I've used it too just before I enter the stage, so I'm not thinking about the emotional place I have to be. I just allow it by doing the psychological gesture. So it's very freeing. It keeps me out of my head, which we've already talked about. But the students too are so not in their bodies and they're so afraid of it. But when they do finally do it, it is, I think, very freeing for them, because a lot of them say, as Will, your student, said, they keep saying, I've never done this before. And it's like, well, that's okay. It's why you're here. And they're afraid of it. But once they do it and they feel like it's really not brain, science, or what is it, rocket science, it's just exploring, expanding into the physical expression. It's just not something they get to do a lot or anybody really talks about. So I think it's freeing both for my students, and it's been freeing for me.
Who has tools that they don't get, that they don't use, they don't understand, it doesn't work for you, haven't found a way into it?
I guess the one, for lack of a better term, I just don't use it very often, or I don't go to it, is something that is one of my mainstays, and that is improv jewelry. Like that, it's I don't know, it's the one I'm the most removed from. Does that make sense? The other ones speak to me so physically immediately. That one seems so still like apparatus, for lack of a better term.
Okay, good. So let's talk about it a little bit. That's a good starting point to ask in what way. So allow me to begin by reiterating, sort of sharing the fundamental concept that the NMCA supports as to why Mr. Chekhov had this specifically on his chart, and what that tool is designed for, or to remind us, because it's on the chart, is that we want to live from moment to moment with a sense of improvisational freedom, really, and that that every time we rehearse a scene or a monologue or practice an actual, what we standardly know as an improvisation, we are utilizing the process of focusing on a tool and looking to allow that tool to have the complete freedom to flow through us and use our voice and body to allow it to express itself and to alter the text and the conditions and the situation. And when we allow the tool to have that sense of freedom and play within us and around us, then the way anything comes out feels as if, and indeed is, the first time it's coming out this way. Even if we use expanding from 0 to 10 5 times in a row on the same monologue, because the expansion will be in process each and every time, and never a memory of the process, but an active state of the process. It will have an immediacy, which is that sense of improvisation. So his intent here is not only the standard sense of improvising a scene as a way to creating deeper understanding, or improvising with exercises and tools to practice skill sets with them, but it is to build that sense of spontaneity moment to moment, no matter how carefully crafted the scene might be in terms of the languaging, the text, the rhythm patterns for its delivery, the detail of the blocking and stuff like that. And that through repetition of a particular sequence being improvised through the tool, little sparkling moments of truth will appear for us. And those sparkling moments will be like little jewels. So those jewels, our artistic higher self will go, wow, that was a cool moment. I want to keep that. I'd like to wear that jewel again. And so by the process of repeating sequences, where he says repetition is the growing power, but repeating a sequence with a tool to find the jewel, generates the ability to really create specificity in your habitual mannerisms and in your emphatic mannerisms, your personality traits, characterization elements that become consistent to the psychology of the character. I hope that, that you understood some of what I was saying there.
Yeah, for sure. I think the reason I don't want to say I ever struggle with it, it's I guess I just forget about it because it seems more intrinsic to just this practice or any other practice. And so I guess maybe I have less conscious awareness of the process. Maybe that's the best way to say it. So when I am cultivating all of those choices through these sources, these other investigations, whatever improvisation that I'm using as a basis, I think I'm doing a lot of this work intuitively, and it's I know what I'm doing, and I know what I like your aha moment, of course. I think we all have those. I think in a sense of it's tougher for me to go to the reverse side of what a lot of people have talked about. It's hard for me to intellectualize what I'm experiencing intuitively and intuitively, for lack of a better term. So like I've got it, I feel it intrinsically, but then when I start defining it, it turns gossamer and it just like leaves. Does that make sense? Because I can cultivate it without having to define it to anybody, but the moment where even when I'm writing it down in my own work, it becomes less important, which sounds like anti-analysis, and I'm not meaning for it to, but that's why I struggle with it, right? That's what I meant by apparatus. It feels like a step for me that's so externally driven because I'm doing a lot of the work, I think, as I go. But when I have to kind of define it and write it in a book or something like that, it slips away. Like the tangibility of it doesn't always define well. Does that make sense? I was way out there on a limb. I hope I didn't lose everybody.
I totally get it, how you're saying it's intrinsic to what you do, because I was thinking that all of us have had those moments of discovery on stage. So I would call that the jewelry. You make a discovery that's not in the script, that the director didn't give you, but it's some bit or something that happens that you realize, I want to hang on to this. Or the director comments and tells you, oh my gosh, that's great, hang on to that. Or me as a director, even in the last show, one of the actors might try something and it was terrific. It was a great piece of jewelry that then we decide to incorporate. So I think even just different languaging, if you thought about it, it's a discovery that you make that you then hang on to. And it was new in that moment. And then you decide to add that, to what's going to continue on.
That's very important and very good. And I think there's one other aspect that it really is just quite functional, as its presence is a reminder to avoid cliche mannerisms, adopting cliche and stereotypical mannerisms, that the little aspects of characterization that we build and develop do want to be intimately connected to the psychology of the character, and we want to avoid standard mannerisms of cigarette smoking and hair fixing and things like that are very cliche, that when we go to find those, we want to find jewels that really sparkle, and the way to find them is through this process of improvisation. So yeah, good. Who else? Who else has maybe a technique or tool or concept even that we put forth that they don't think much about, that just kind of gets overlooked in their process? Maybe they're curious how they could get more use out of it.
Disguises.
Okay, good one. And in our Chekhov training intensive, we don't go into disguises a whole lot because it's a more layered concept. So we go talk more about that in the deeper by demand area. And disguises are something that Michael Chekhov speaks of in the realm of characterization, where he is in effect speaking about the inner and the outer life of the character, what they reveal to the world and what they hide from the world. And he uses the term mask as a term that describes the entire, like if we use the term mise en scène, we are talking about every sound and smell and sight and vibration that the audience takes in. So it's everything. It's the actor's movement, it's the text, it's the lighting, it's the cinematic scope, it's the costuming, it's everything they're experiencing. But if we take it down to just what they get from you, the actor, that is the actor's mask. What your lines, your tempo and rhythm, your movement patterns, your jewelry, whatever ways that you are offering and revealing and expressing this character is the actor's mask. So that's different than disguises, just to separate those two things. Disguises are a part of the characterization where by what means does the character hide its truth from, and from whom? So if we look at The Man Who Came to Dinner, we see that we have the disguise of Sherry actually not having a broken hip. And we see at a certain point the disguises that he uses to hide the fact that he's not an invalid, and who he unveils his disguise, and what the steps are that he takes, at what point, what are the psychological conditions where he starts to reveal more and more, and to whom, regarding the truth. And somebody like Iago very intensely has disguises. Even Macbeth is disguising his intentions, in the beginning. And so how are these characters truth is, hiding what their truth is, and by what means do they express and conceal? So having it on there reminds us that there are many different ways to work with disguises, and we can go beyond the sort of cliche processes and find creative ways that deal with the layering of the inner life and the outer life, and who is a plus or minus. We talk about the plus or minus of character relationship, who is a positive element to this character's life, and how much do they reveal or disguise in relation to them. Tartuffe is another great character filled with disguise. And so that is what disguises is about. So now if you take for a moment and go to your ideal artistic center and imagine that you can ask your ideal artistic center, in what way does knowing about this concept free me as an artist? What could it offer me? Let's take a moment and ask that. Any thoughts or responses come back? Does thinking about it give you a little more insight into it?
Well, I will throw out that since we're talking about freedom, I think thinking about disguises lets you be free from cliche acting when you're always told, just be real, just be yourself on stage. You know, there's a whole school of thought with that. And then you're thinking about characters are not always themselves, so to speak, and neither are we. You know, we wear social masks all the time, depending on the situation that we're in, and so do characters. So for me, that lets you be free from, oh, I just have to be real and honest, because characters aren't always honest and truthful. So that's how that would hit me when you just had us think about that as far as freeing the talent.
I just saw a production of Hedda Gabler, and it didn't really work because we didn't see her when no one was there. That's when her mask changed. Then that's when she is revealed, but she keeps the mask on with everybody else, I think. And so what happened was we missed an opportunity to see the vulnerability of Hedda Gabler, you know, the world that she lives in, and how her inability to love, her inability to, you know, just whatever, however you want to think of Hedda Gabler. But and I think that the actor absolutely missed that opportunity because nothing looked vastly different, physically, emotionally, psychologically. So that's why I think having all these other tools also to hold up that disguises can bring the audience in to see the character much more clearly, more quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And we can, like, things like centers are so clearly an excellent tool to be able to use to let your center shift when you shift, you know, how much of your disguise or mask you're uncovering. And that I absolutely can imagine, as you describe it, Babs, if we lose that opportunity to see, you know, the inner life, you know, how can we really empathize for the character? Interesting thing about things like commedia and things where there, and even Shakespeare has quite a few asides, right? Direct address monologues and things like that, where the character is actually unveiling, taking off their disguise and sharing directly with the audience their inner quandary that they're looking to hide from the rest of the world. So those are great opportunities to use some of the other elements to strengthen the clarity of revealing the disguising.
There's something that is conflicting, and it's style, because you tend to think that style is very limiting, but when I think about it, I mean, today we're using style, I feel, less and less. I think. But when you try to think about it, it's quite freeing, because you have like limits to, like a scope, and you can do inside whatever you want, and you can break it, and you can come back to it, and you can expand and narrow it. So it's something that you tend to think that it's limiting, but I think it's a great tool, actually.
I think you're right on with this concept of this of working within a set of guidelines, and the sense of style. We had an experience in our early training intensive days in Maine, where an actress could not understand psychological gesture at all, and she was doing a period monologue, and she wasn't able to connect to the monologue, and she couldn't understand psychological gesture. And then we coached her into the creating a gesture in this period style, And it was like a magic wand tapped on her head. And when she found this gesture, and I think it was from Misanthrope, and she found this gesture in that itself had this period style, and by combining the concept of creating a PG in the period style, she understood both the PG, and she never dropped the style from there. She just totally got the style and got the concept of PG. So in that moment, that style really freed up her, it released all her inhibitions, when it got, blended with the PG. So that was a very exciting moment. How do things like the Four Brothers free you? So that's something I would like, the feeling of beauty, ease, entirety, and form. And to look for a moment today, in this day and era, under our current conditions, is there a way that you can use the Four Brothers of Art to help free you up, not just artistically, but humanly?
Well, I would just jump in to say that concept of beauty and, the artistic sense of beauty, of finding that. And I think we've probably actually seen that if you've been watching media or talking to friends, that there are beautiful outcomes to what is a terrible situation on the outside, but that people are suddenly spending more time with their families and getting closer with them. Or they are discovering how to cook because they can't go out to a restaurant and they've never really been a cook before, or simple things like that. Or I know here where I am, because everything's blooming and beautiful, it's really being outside and taking walks when you can and seeing roses and flowers and really appreciating them. They aren't just part of the background. Now they become something, much more in the foreground for us to hang on to, and just seeing how nature is continuing on, creating beauty amidst this pandemic. And for me, that's important to hang on to at this point.
It's a specific form, and it's a very different form than what the world as a community has experienced before. And this form affects live performers more so than anything could ever affect the massive performance community, as the closure or the withdrawal of all audiences, basically, from the live audience performance exchange opportunity. And that impact is going to sustain itself for a long time because of the limitations that will continue beyond the immediate sort of intent to flatten the curve, the growth line of the pandemic. And that process of being able to come together as an audience member and lose your personal identity by merging with your community and committing all your focus toward a single field of focus, which is the performer, the performance, while breathing the same air, literally in the same space, has been shattered. It's been shuttered. And so there's a tremendous amount of reforming that is going to be occurring. And there's a tremendous amount of uneasiness around this disease in terms of the survival of the artist and the artistic structures that have been built to nurture our audiences. And there are discussions about the intensity of mental strain trying to balance this. If we only can perform before small audiences, what fee will they have to pay in order for the artist and the artistic institution to be able to offer the entertainment on any sort of sustaining level? So being able to employ these four brothers of beauty and ease and entirety and form will, I think, become increasingly important to our freedom. One way that they can free us is when we go into states of fear and worry, we come into a hard contraction, or we overexpand into unfocused and imbalanced states. We sort of fly off the handle or out of control, or we plummet or cringe or crunch. And both of those extreme polarities are going to diminish our ability to think on a higher level and to respond on a higher level. We will be enslaved to our habitual practices and to our fundamental responses of fight, flight, freeze, and fold. So at this particular time, engaging in the Four Brothers of Art, wherever you possibly can, will have a healing effect for you and will literally free up your breathing capacities. Will literally allow your blood to flow through you more freely, for you to breathe more freely. So that's one thing I really wanted to point out today. I also wanted to talk just in general about the concept of why we really want to understand how each thing can free our talent. Because if one of the most important things that we can do as an artist is our own self-development. And it's that practice, observe, apply, the POA home play process, where you take some portion of your day and literally do some exercise, and then take a minute in the morning, midday, and evening to observe that somewhere in the world. Notice the tree and its degree of expansion, or notice the dog and whether it's molding or flying. Notice the butterfly that it's, fluttering and floating, whatever. And another minute, morning, midday, and eve, to actually do some fundamental practical task. Brush your teeth, eat a meal, gas up your car, whatever it is. Actually practicing applying that tool. And when we do that, at the end of the day, to reflect and ask, wow, what was that process for me? What was that like for me? And that flying back process is, in effect, taking this fifth guiding principle and saying, how did that free me? And when I see what my practice, observation, and applying actually did for me, then it excites me to want to do it again. So when I practice a tool or ask any particular element of the technique, in what way do you free me? When I know why, and I know how it does that, then I will want to seek mastery of it. If I never understand what it's doing on the chart or what gifts it brings me, my will force will not be strong enough to want to lead me to mastery. And if I have the why is this tool a good tool to be good at, and that's in me, and I understand how I can apply it, and I can understand exactly what it is, then I will start to be able to imagine the future potentials of it. And that outlines the basic format system of education for MAT, format system of education that is a very successful teaching and learning model. And so it's interesting to me that in the 5 guiding principles, Michael Chekhov has actually the format system developed after Michael Chekhov's 5 guiding principles, but that you can overlay the format system and his 5 guiding principles to see that he wants us to understand why we are doing this technique. Guiding principle, we are doing this technique so that we can trigger states of inspired action. That's why we do this technique. What is the technique? What is the process? The process is mastering individual elements of it so that we have the ability to build our relationship to each individual element. And when we are able to have a strong relationship to it, we know that concentration on any single element triggers all of them. And that's built in there to his guiding principle number 4. And the entire set of principles is founded on this higher ego and the ability of the creative spirit to unite all that is. So when we're looking to ask a particular tool in guiding principle 5, in what way do you help me? Who do we ask? How do we ask it? We ask it through the Ideal Artistic Center. And it can be a meditative process. So you can, it's personal work that if you want to do it, I'm inviting you to go into connecting with the Ideal Artistic Center that already exists in you and asking it to share with you any insights it has about a particular tool. And if every once in a while you just take a random tool and say, hey, I want to talk to you, tool, today, just, share with me, how do you free me? In what way do you free me? And as you do that, going around there, you will find more and more answers. And you can even ask each guiding principle, like, how does the fact that intangible means of expression create tangible experiences? How does that free my talent? Well, knowing that I have so much more power than just what is in my physical body. I have so much more power than any other acting technique ever told me about. No other acting technique told me about atmosphere. It didn't tell me about radiating and receiving. It didn't tell me about psychological gesture. Wow, and you mean I can send these powers and I can imagine it? Never spoke to me about an imaginary body before. And that the independent existence of images has a practical application. Wow. So yeah, the concept of that there is a higher self and that I can use that as a practical means of artistic training, that really frees up my talent. So just leading yourself through some of these questions, literally asking, as he says, to what degree and by what means do you free my artistic talent? So I hope that was helpful, a helpful little exploration and discussion. Is there anyone who'd like to share any thoughts?
And I thought that was a beautiful wrap up that you just did about why that guiding principle number 5 is important. And I'm going to have to rush off to my next Zoom meeting.
Okay.
So thank you all for being here. It's really
Will.
great to have people connect and, get your thoughts and ideas.
Great.
Thank you, Will.
Sean, did you have something you wanted to suggest?
I think one of the things that I'm discovering and listening to all of these more and more is there's a tangible relationship between kind of internal drivers and external forces that affect those drivers. Like if you just, and it's not something that maybe I just skipped it in my notes or I just kind of didn't cling on to it when I was really there. But the two things that we really talked about today with, well, one of the things that I seeded and then this, or both of those are less about an actual starting point and then more about how to processorially guide a starting point, right? So if I start with a psychological gesture and then these other things influence that in an external way, it reminds me a lot of how bound and free flow is sometimes kind of like applicate on top. If we just look at like Laban or whatever, it's like how that kind of almost sits outside that universe and then acts as an influencer on those. So I don't know, it just didn't land with me, I guess, last summer, but maybe that if that's the takeaway from this meeting, I've definitely it's been worth the price of admission. Believe me, that was great. Because I
Yes.
struggled with the four brothers last summer, and I think that's why, because I was using them as, I think, a point of departure, which I guess you can, but in just hearing you describe it there, it seems more like an influencer on a point of departure.
Yeah, it goes back and forth, which is why the arrows on the chart go both directions. There's an arrow on either point, either end. So that it can be a point of departure. It can manifest in the process of focusing on some other thing. And that's where that number 4, GP number 4 really is at play. That when you, for example, the four brothers, when you look at any great work of art, it's going to have those. It probably in no way started with those, but because of the inspiration that appeared, the inspiration brought those all into place. Yeah. So that's great, Sean. Ophir.
It just seems so amazing that this man that all his life was censored and was, he talks so much about freedom and about love. And this is always moving because when I think about it, it's amazing.
Thank you, Ophir. It really is. And when we think of our own era and our time, and we think of the restrictions and the limitations and situations that we're facing, and then we go back and we look at Michael Chekhov's biography and we see, okay, well, 100 years ago, he was right in the midst of coming out of a year of absolute mental insanity, in the midst of a revolution, losing his cousin and his mother, and struggling with complete and total social upheaval, with very little, was still in the throes of a massive revolution from centuries of a living style, and he then had to, and then was an emigre and just traveling to find freedom. And so I feel greatly blessed that we had his work, and especially these 5 guiding principles, and to be able to hear him in his own words, speaking them and sharing these concepts with us. And it is the NMCA pedagogy is absolutely anchored in these 5 guiding principles, so that we bring them into the teaching structure at the end. But we hope that when you by that time you reflect and you go, oh yeah, I see, that's exactly what we did. We looked at each point, we looked at these intangibles, we stepped through all of these and tried to give you a firm grounding in these. If you're ever working with the technique and you're just curious about, where should I look now? What should I focus on? My recommendation is looking at these 5 principles and just seeing if one of them is speaking to you, calling to you to invite you to explore it a little more. So, all right, team, we're going to wrap this up. I'm so appreciative for all of your contribution. I hope you're able to watch all of the ones leading up to this, and that there's also 4 episodes of on the higher ego that I did with Jorg Andres called Michael Chekhov Masters Talk. And that's would be a great video series for you to watch if you haven't caught that. And email or let us know if you have future talks. And yes, these are recorded. The earlier, Beth was asking about the recording, and the earlier episodes 1 through 4 are posted. If you look up the NMCA way, or that should bring it to you. There's Lisa Dalton's YouTube channel, and on Chekhov.net, Chekhov.net. On the front page, I think it's on the upper right corner, is a link to another page with both of those series listed, and also Wil recorded for you, for us, the 5 Tibetan rites with his Tibetan editions, and he also recorded a warm-up, and he also recorded some other things. So they're all on that page on Chekhov.net. So you can access those links more clearly. Yeah, his regular sort of, boppy warm-up that he does after the Tibetans and stuff like that. So that's very cool. All right, my friends, thank you so much for joining.
My favorite person is...
One minute on your imaginary bodies.
We took a scene from Golden Boy. We all did the same scene. Now in chaos.